Hey guys, today be showing another restoration project I've been working on, and this is a very interesting Polymoog we've got here. This is a 203A, and it actually belonged to a guy by the name of Richard Teitelbaum, who was a musician back in the 70s and 80s, very talented musician, and unfortunately he passed away, and this was donated to the Wesleyan University. So I had the privilege of restoring this thing for the university, and a huge shout out to you guys at the university for giving me the opportunity to do this for you. Real pleasure getting to bring this one back alive for you guys. But it was just a really interesting instrument. It's got some history, like I say. It belonged to Richard. But what was interesting about this, I listened to some of Richard's music, I restored it, so it's kind of this cool kind of connection thing going on. But this one was pretty rough. So I started with what I typically do with these things. I started just by diagnostics, testing it, kind of seeing what works, what doesn't work. And then I basically stripped it down and started with the under chassis, cleaning everything up really good. This one had a lot of rust and corrosion in it. So I ended up having a lot of screws break off and having to take a tap and die set and tap new threads in some of the screw holes after I drill them out. And so it was definitely some work on this particular unit. I had some corrosion on the control left boards. I had to really clean that up and neutralize the corrosion. And then it actually ate some of the button contacts for the variation pre buttons. So I ended up replacing like 14 of these buttons, but I kept the original caps, the original tops. So I was able to keep the color match between the interface. It doesn't look like it has new buttons in there, but they're new old stock, so worked out really well there. Brand new slider caps, new old stock slider caps. Cleaned all the sliders. Like I say, went through all the circuit boards, did the updates as needed. This one needed a lot of updates because it's serial number 65, so it was definitely, it needed some work. New LEDs, rebuilt the keyboard assembly, new key bushings, contact alignment, contact cleaning, contact replacement for two of them. Two of them had actually corroded in half. Never have seen that. So I ended up having to replace the actuators for the contacts and the contacts themselves for two notes. So that was a kind of a mess. For the rust it had underneath the keyboard itself looked really good inside. I was actually kind of shocked because usually when you have rust in these things, it's actually inside the key bed. The key bed actually still looked really, really good. But it was on the bottom lip where it sets against the chassis. And so I did a phosphoric acid treatment to kill the rust. And then I painted the under chassis there, or the under the keyboard. So the rust is now under control. And so that's how I treated that. So no more rust, no more problems there. Like I say, replace the screws after I tapped new threads and all that good stuff. So it's fantastic. But just kind of walking around here, I also cleaned this interface up really good, re-chromed the interface, so it really looks great now. Now that's not real chrome, guys. It's just plastic with. I use a special paint that is chrome when you repaint it, so it works really well. But anyways, did that, and then some really cool stuff about this unit too, because it being early and it being Richard's, there's some really interesting stuff. So walking around back here, just kind of let you see the back here. New hardware back here. You can see it was originally taped. I got rid of the tape residue the best I could. The plastic's not very forgiving, so I have to be kind of careful with how I clean it. But new screws back here that were missing. Here's what's cool though. So we've got serial number 1065, making this the 65th Polymoog built, which is really cool. But we got the sticker on it right here, which is really interesting. And I preserved what I could of it. A lot of it was already missing, but it says basically that Polymoog serial number 1065, property of the engineering department for engineering rework, to be returned to engineering. So that's a pretty cool sticker. So basically that was the Moog engineering department they're talking about there. And this being an early serial number, it was probably sent out to Richard, and he probably beta tested it, so to speak, and gave feedback to the engineers at Moog, and then they would work, to make things work the way they need to work. But you can just see how clean it looks across here. The only real issue I see with it as far as cosmetic blemishes, it's got one little cigarette burn right there on top, but that's it. Besides that, everything else looks really good, really clean. Just a fantastic Polymoog, like I say. But anyways, I'll show you also right quick the parts that came out of this thing, because some of you might be curious about that. So here was the headache right here. This is all the broken screws and the rusted screws I replaced because they were just rusty. But a lot of broken screws. I actually had some inserts I had to remove and then reinstall new inserts because they were so rusted together I couldn't get the screws out of them. So that was a lot of work. Then some of these screws are just rusty, so I just replaced them because they were rusty. You know, just take care of the problem while you're there. But all the old chips, these are some of the old CMOS chips. The contact sets I replaced. You can see these are the two contacts that had corroded apart. You can see what's left of the contact spring right there. It actually corroded apart right there in the top. But just the old components. I also had to replace one key. So this is a key here that had cracked from the inside. And so I went on to replace the whole assembly because you can see how rusty that is. So I went on to just replace that one key. It was the only rusty one really in the unit. But yeah, you can kind of see how it's actually, the rust made it swell from the inside and it cracked the plastic is what happened. That's exactly what happened in this key. Now, what's also interesting about these early Polymoogs, I think I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to bring it up again, is that Pratt Reed keyboards, they didn't make a semi-weighted keyboard in this era. So what Moog did is they went and bought buckshot, like you go hunting with, and they actually filled the bottom of the keys with buckshot and then glued the buckshot, made like a glue ball using the buckshot, and then they glue it inside the keys, and that's how they got semi-weighted keyboard on the early Polymoogs. So just some cool history there for you. You can actually take these keys apart and there's little buckshot balls of lead, and that's what they used. Later on they would actually put lead weights in there and glue them in and actually have them melted to form the key. That's kind of how they did it. But these early ones, they were interesting in that sense. But anyways, let me get the camera on the tripod here and I'll make you guys a sound demo. Okay, so now we're in variation mode. I'm just going to start by showing you that the synthesizer section works, and we'll go through some of the functions of the resonator, the VCF, etc. here. But what we have the waveforms. I'll go through the sawtooth first, then I'll go through the variable pulse wave. So that's really what makes the Polymoog so interesting too, is that you have this double mix oscillator, and they are independent from each other, with the frequency modulation, the pulse width modulation, etc. Anyways, the sawtooth, we'll start with as mentioned. You select them actually by down here in the keyboard wave shape area. You've got a lower and upper because you can actually do key splits, which is pretty cool. You can just kind of set the things different for the low octave and then have the others for a different waveform, etc. So anyways, the sawtooth has a footage control of 8 or 4. So it's, as you can hear, so that's your actual footage. Then we got the frequency modulation. So it sounds like that right there, and that's really all the controls you have of the sawtooth. You do have a rank tune, which is where you can detune it against the pulse width. It's not very impressive until you add the pulse width, but it allows you to do some really cool like fifths and thirds and that kind of stuff between the oscillators. But anyways, let me go down the keyboard here. I'll show you that all the sawtooths work. So there's all the keys with the sawtooth, and you will hear a volume drop when you select the rank tune. I'm sorry, the footage of the sawtooth. And actually, you got a volume control here, so you can mix the sawtooth with a variable pulse for that reason, because sometimes you want to make the sawtooth stand out more. So actually, you actually have a mix control, and upper and lower once again, so you can do combinations for the splits. So that's your sawtooth. Like I said, it's pretty simple. Then we got the variable pulse. So right now it's a square wave. Oops, let me slip it. There we go. That was actually the key split you heard. Where I have the sawtooth down here and a square wave up here. Or right the opposite. So not very impressive right now, but you can just kind of hear how that works. So we got the square wave on now. So you got your frequency modulation. So you got your rate and amount. Then we got the variable pulse. Here we can actually shape this into a pulse wave. You've also got one for the lower. Then you've got the actual modulation of the pulse width control here by the amount. Same thing for lower and upper. But the upper and lower does share the one LFO for the rate. But what makes this impressive is now we can combine that with the frequency modulation. So there's that. Now we'll combine the sawtooth and square wave together. And this is where it gets really interesting, because now you can hear we have no frequency modulation on the sawtooth. It's all the square wave, or variable pulse. Now we're just bringing up the frequency modulation for the sawtooth. So that's the pretty much the oscillator section. Like I say, you've got your rank tune. So that's that. Something I did forget to show you though is the square wave footage. So you got 8 and 16 on it. So we turn this back to square wave, turn everything down. So it's got a 16, which gets really low. So it's meshed with the 8 footage. That is mixing the sawtooth, just jumping back between the sawtooth and variable pulse. And now we'll go to the loudness control section. So that's pretty much the oscillator section of the synthesizer. Now we got the loudness control. Now you'll see me hit this button here a lot. I'll bring this up on every Polymoog video. What this is actually doing, this is the final decay switch, and you got a manual and lock mode. When you're a manual, it's looking for the foot pedal, the foot sustain. So you'll have no sustain time after you let off the note until you hit lock. Now, there's a design flaw, or not really a flaw, but just limitations of what they could do back in this era, is that if you just leave it in lock mode, you'll actually hear things kind of build up over the period of time, which you've already kind of probably heard. So if we play something, you'll actually hear it. So you can kind of hear it right there. It just kind of drones out just a little bit there. But we can set our loudness decay here. So there's that. Now, something that makes the Polymoog very interesting is there's unlimited polyphony. So you can play every note on this thing because there's actually a VCA per key. So we can bring up the decay release and you'll actually... Now what's fun with that particular application when you have the unlimited polyphony, you have this turn all the way up, is go to the resonator section. You can do some really cool drone kind of stuff. So bring this up. I got everything turned on in the resonator right now. I'll bring up the lows. There we go. I had that set to upper. So we'll bring up the gain, emphasis. So that's just the low. So you hear how crazy that can get. It can get really crazy because it just sustains all those notes forever. That's just an example of the drone there, where you can just set the decay release all the way up. Now this is early Polymoog, so things are a little bit different just based off the programming changes here. So you got your attack. We've also got the dynamic response too. So if we bring the sustain down, this is actually where you can really notice the dynamic response here. We can set the amount of dynamics. That's how sensitive it is. So you kind of see how that works. But just based on design, there's things that will affect volume. Just naturally how this thing works. So sustain, when you bring sustain up, it's always going to affect the amount of volume you have overall. So as you can hear there, so that's how that all works. But of course we can bring that all the way down to the K release all the way to 0. And it's just like having this button in manual mode. You have no release. If we bring the sustain all the way down, you got just a click. So anyways, you can hear the loudness control there, how that works. Something I did forget to go over, I believe I did forget this. I forgot to show you that all the square waves work for all the keys. So let me go back here, we'll set this back up. So I'll go down the keyboard, this is just a square wave. So let me go down the keyboard here and I'll show you that all the actual square waves work across the key bed. That's important because there's divider circuitry per oscillator, because it's a 2 oscillator synthesizer that drives those dividers. So let me show you this right quick. So there's the square wave, and once again you've heard the sawtooth, which I'll just go back over it too right quick so you can hear it. So you get something like that. So there's your 2 waveforms there and all the keys. So that's that. I'll show you further the resonator just a little bit there. So now we're back in resonator. That's band pass. You got high pass, and then we got low pass. Now what makes the Polymoog very interesting is that you can combine all these sections. So we got that, plus we got the filter. So let me go to the filter right quick. This is the voltage control filter. So I got LFO in there. So we got the emphasis control. Now this is just a mono filter. It's only one filter that processes all the keys. That's where some people get the idea that it's kind of limited, but it's actually very nice because it's kind of neat having that one filter, because it just does different things in other sense that other sense don't really quite do. So we got the cutoff. You got key tracking, so we can actually turn this key tracking up, and that's actually also the circuit that's used for external synthesizer tracking. So if we play the keyboard, we'll actually just do a split here. You have that filter tracking the keys. We put a little glide on that from this external keyboard circuit. So you get something like that. But you've got the modulation. It's got its own modulation source for sweeping the filter. What's really nice is when you play this filter, so you got a triangular waveform. You also got sample and hold, which is cool. So that's the modulation section. You also got a contour generator just for your filter, so bring that up. Make it have a decay here. Put that in manual mode for this. And that's really where you get into that single filter. Sometimes you'll have it where it just kind of builds up because it's only one filter, and you get all these keys that can play through it. So that's the decay. We got attack. So you got that, then you've also got sustain. So we'll go here and go, which affects how far down that's going to go. I've got it in split mode. You can also split the filter, so we can put it on lower. And something that's a lot of fun about this, you can put the filter on low end. We'll put the resonator in the upper keys. Bring up the resonator. Or we can do right soft, so we can put the filter on the upper keys, the resonator on the lower octave. So you can do all kind of stuff like that. Of course, then we'll combine them back together, because what you can also do is just put them together in the mix. So anyways, you can hear how that sounds. So that's the filter, and like I said, you can combine these things in different ways. And then we've also got direct output, which you've already heard. We can combine all these things together. And what's really nice, I don't have it set up, but you can actually go to each output and have these set to different mixer channels and have them panned in different ways. That's when it gets really, really cool. And actually, since Halloween's coming up, I'll post a link to a video I did where I used the Polymoog in that configuration for our Halloween take. But we'll combine direct with the resonator. So here it is, just direct output. There's combined resonator. Then we'll put the filter on with sample and hold here. So that's the combination there. But that's really all the sections of this thing. Something I did forget to cover again in the oscillator. Sorry, there's a lot going on here in my head. We've also got in the oscillator section, we got a lock and free button. And a lot of you might be questioning what that does. Well, I'll show you what it does real quick. So if we have, it's a dual oscillator, so they're always going to run independent. So for example, right now if we have a modulation on the sawtooth, the square wave will not be modulated because I actually got the frequency modulation turned down. As you hear, I got the pulse width modulation, but if I actually combine this and try to match the frequency of that, it's not going to sound. There's no way to actually match the frequency modulation because they're independent LFOs, so they're always going to be phase different. So what this does, allows you to lock the two oscillators together internally, and now it's actually going to share one oscillator for both the sawtooth and variable pulse. So now you've got a single modulation source for both. And you still have independent pulse width modulation. So there's that versus free. So for certain sounds, that's a really nice feature, especially if you're wanting something like a piano sound that has only one vibrato source, like a tremolo pedal or something like that. That's a way you can actually kind of do that. But anyways, now we'll go to presets. So the presets are not quite as impressive as being in direct or as in variation mode, but at the time these were, pretty good. So the volumes on these, once again, are going to be quieter per preset, just to kind of have the way these things are. But here's preset 1, which is a strings. Once again, I got the lock and free. Now something neat about preset 1 is it's actually got a its own little contour generator for modulating the frequency modulation. So we've got a variation mode here. You have modulation comes in, it dies out. As you can hear, we can go down, you can edit all these presets. As you can see, I can go in here and make the sliders active. So we'll go down to 16 footage on the square wave, and it gets a really nice, almost CS80 territory. And right now, I should mention too, we're going to the mode filters, which are the fixed little filters to give the preset a simulation of what it's trying to copy. So we'll go to direct output on this preset. So as you can hear, that's just a really cool feature that one preset has that modulation. So now we'll go back to mode filters. Now this is piano. You hear the dynamic response. So that's preset 2, preset 3. Just an organ sound. Then we got harpsichord. It says harpsichord, funk. We We got clavichord. Not a bad sound there. So that's harpsichord or clavichord. And now vibes, this one I typically change out to be Vox Humana, and you'll see why. It's just a very simple preset. It's just a square wave. That's the preset. So that's the vibes preset. And then we got brass. So that's the presets in general. You also got this part fill, or part full, which is confusing to a lot of people too. So let's say that you want to edit something and you want to keep it in edit mode while you're in presets. Well, if we go here, for example, we'll just go back to 1. And let's say I don't always have to turn this thing to lock and manual here. I put it in lock, I can hit this part full button, and if I change presets, that's going to hold that lock mode, where if I take that off and change presets, it's always going to go back to manual. So that's a really handy feature, and it does the same thing for anything in variation mode. If we hit that and change presets, it'll hold the variation mode until I take that off and reset the preset, and it'll go back to preset mode of your loudness controller. So pretty cool. Okay, so something else I'm going to go over real quick here as well is that each preset also has its own VCF programming. So it has its own VCF setup per preset. So if we start with preset 1, which we're in now, you'll actually hear that the filter has its own programmed response to each preset. So here's preset 1. It's just a nice little filter suite. We got preset 2. Preset 3. And that's actually an envelope. That's the contour of the filter. It's actually got a nice little slope and then it decays. Preset 4. So that's 4, which is harpsichord. Here's funk. Now funk has a sample and hold pattern on it. As you can hear. Clavichord. Then we got vibes. And then we got brass. And there's the presets with their filter programming. So anyways, that's the last thing I really kind of wanted to go over there was the VCF with the presets. But as always, guys, appreciate you guys watching. And a special shout out to Wesleyan University for giving me the opportunity to restore Richard Teitelbaum's Polymoog here. Real honor here to get this thing going. And really do appreciate it once again. There'll be more here to come very soon. Take care.